Hello, everybody, and welcome to this new edition of the BasuandGodin Notebook. I am Marc-Antoine Godin with Arpin Basu on this Friday, January 24th. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm good. How are you? You're back from Detroit.
Yes.
You had a trip to Detroit. You're back today.
Exciting trip.
Was it?
Oh, man, it was. Yeah. I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to be back. Yeah. But I'll spare the details to our listeners who I don't want to gross out. So anyway, let's talk about the game. Let's talk about those Canadiens who.
Let's talk about the team. Yeah, they lost. Bums.
Not only that, they lost.
A bunch of bums.
Oh, terrible. But it's, after the game against Toronto, after them clawing their way back against Tampa, and now that loss in Detroit where they looked flat for most of the game. I think we can fairly say that this is a tired team right now. I don't know if they're going to hit the wall and start losing on a regular basis, but the heavy schedule that they had, the number of banged up bodies that they've got to, it seems to be taking a toll on the performances of the team, and we saw that in Detroit.
Yeah, perfectly normal. I mean, the thing is that, it's easy for us to make a lot of the Canadian schedule. Every team has a compressed schedule this year. It's tough on every team. It's just going to be a reality. I think there's a certain mental fatigue that might be setting in with the Canadiens. Like I asked Marty St. Louis before they left for Detroit on Wednesday after practice. I was like, everyone made a big deal of Ken Hughes and Jeff Gordon coming out before the season and say our goal is to play meaningful games in March and we want, in the mix, hashtag trademark, all that stuff. Meaningful games being the goal, not necessarily making the playoffs, but being in a position to make the playoffs and having games matter. That game Thursday mattered. These are two teams fighting for the same playoff spot. The Canadiens had swept a back-to-back with Detroit. They wanted to get back at them for that. This is a new team under a new coach who's playing a different brand of hockey, a better brand of hockey. It was, by any measure, a meaningful game. But It's still only January. And so Marty's answer to that, because to me it was like, okay, they've reached their goal. They're playing meaningful games right now. Like these young players are experiencing what it's like to play against teams you're fighting for a playoff spot with, like, whether you consider them to be in the same class of team or not, which I don't. The game against Tampa brought the Canadiens to within 1 point of them in the standings. The game against the Rangers was a big game because the Rangers are in the mix with them. They're playing a bunch of these big games. And Marty's answer was like, I feel like we've been playing meaningful games for over a month now or something like that. I forget the time frame he used, but he's like, we've been playing meaningful games for a long time because of the hole they dug themselves and their desire to get out of that hole. They've given themselves very little margin for error from mid to late November till now.
Yeah.
And so, to see this team react the way it has for as long as it has gives some meaning to this season. Now is the next phase of it. And I think what we're experiencing now is the in-between phase. Like they made their push to get back in the mix. That took a lot out of them, mentally draining, physically difficult, a lot of tough opponents, a lot of difficult travel. There's bound to hit a lull. I think the Four Nations break is going to come at a perfect time for this team.
Yes.
We still have some things to do before then. And then we're going to see what it's like when they hit the real push to actually get into a playoff spot and those meaningful games. But really, they've achieved their goal. They've played like a month of meaningful hockey. And so it's really been beneficial, whether they continue it or not. there's been like serious benefits to what's been going on here for the last month, and I think Marty recognizes that.
You mentioned the break, the Four Nations break. It's going to be extremely important. Well, I guess every team in the league will look at that break and say, "Oof, that's our chance at a breather, recharging the batteries and getting healthy again." But I heard that on last Sunday, the game before, actually the game against New York, before the game, so Owen Beck is called up, and there seemed to be a bit of a confusion regarding would he play or not, and
well, the Canadiens wouldn't commit to it.
No, that's it. And I heard that Chantal Maccabi said something to the effect of, "We've got so many guys that are game time decision that I cannot confirm a lineup just yet."
Right.
So that gives an idea. And the minute that they had a full practice available to them, 6 guys skipped it. So
that was their first practice in 9 days.
Yeah. So that tells you something about how banged up they are and how, what they have to go through in order to play those games.
Caden Gooley blocked another shot in Detroit that seemed to be leaving him in a bit of pain again.
I feel like every night, every game, there's something that happens to Caden Gooley, and you wonder, is it going to be it? Is he going to get injured tonight?
I mentioned it last episode,
He goes through a lot of pain, this kid.
Yeah.
A lot of pain. So, So anyway, it's going to be a welcome break, but the Canadiens still have to play 8 games before that. So I don't expect them, just like Kent Hughes said in his mid-season wrap up, I don't expect us to go 8-2 in every set of 10 games until the end of the season. Mm-hmm. But if the Canadiens can just be a 500 team until the break, that would be good enough. What you want to avoid is a skid, because every team has had a good push. Every team that's in the mix right now, but you lose 4 in a row, and it might be your death sentence. So you don't want to fall into that trap. So if the Canadiens can at least maintain themselves until then, that'd be okay.
Well, I mean, they have a big test on Saturday in the sense that, the Canadiens haven't lost 2 games in a row since the 9-2 blowout to Pittsburgh, and then the 4-2 loss in Winnipeg, which to me is the real starting point of the way they're playing now, is that game in Winnipeg. They played an excellent hockey game in that game. Were in it for the majority of that game and really started playing the brand of hockey that we've seen since then, that night. And it took that 6 unanswered goals in the third period against Pittsburgh to get it out of them. So, that's the last time they lost 2 games in a row.
That's 6 weeks. 6 weeks ago.
That's 6 weeks. Yeah, that's a long time. So it's this game against New Jersey is going to be a test, even without Jacob Markstrom, which we should point out.
I knew you would go there. I knew you'd go there.
If Jacob Markstrom, who the Devils have announced will be out for 4 to 6 weeks, and so this actually hurts the Canadiens, the Four Nations break, because it gives Jacob Markstrom 2 weeks to heal without missing any games, because I believe Jake Allen has played 15 games so far this season. If you were to play 40, and the Devils would make the playoffs, which they will, the 3rd round pick the Canadiens got for Jake Allen would turn into a 2nd round pick. So I still don't like the chances of that happening. It's not very likely, but this at least opens the door to that. That's becomes more of a possibility than it was just a couple of days ago before Markstrom got hurt. So,
yeah, I don't know. It's only 15 games. That's not a lot for Jake. He's behind the necessary pace for them.
He is, but now he's going to get a run of games here. Like you would think. And so,
well, you would think, but 4 to 6 weeks, and that includes the break.
That includes the break, which is tough. If the Canadiens would be really well served if this had happened at the Four Nations, like in the gold medal game of the Four Nations, if Jacob Markstrom got hurt for 4 to 6 weeks, that would be a bit of a game changer for them. But no, as it stands, he's not going to He's probably not going to miss that many games.
Don't nibble with Schadenfreude just now, okay? Don't wish ill
I mean, if he's
upon
going to get injured
others.
anyway,
Yeah,
that would have been a better timing for the Canadiens. That's all I'm saying. But yeah,
yeah. So yeah, no, it's likely that he'll remain. It will remain the third round pick. Listen, among the players who are showing signs of fatigue, there's Lane Hudson.
yeah.
A lot of people said that he had probably his worst game of the year against Toronto, and he didn't look very good against Detroit
I
either.
thought he was worse. I thought he was worse against Detroit personally. I mean,
Yeah.
than he was against Toronto. Like I thought he, yeah. I would put that as worse myself.
How? Why do you make it
I
a worse game?
just because it
You
was
want to
in
ask him?
Toronto, it was a few mistakes, but I didn't think he played. It was a -5 that was not really. I felt indicative of the way he played. Like he wasn't. I felt in Detroit, like attempting that one timer on the Cop shorthanded goal, like that was just a bad decision. That was. There's a lot of fatigue that just appears to be evident in his game, and it was more evident in the Detroit game, to me at least, than it was in the Toronto game. And so, and as soon as you get any tentativeness in Lane Hudson's game, it changes everything for him, and he just seems tentative right now. Like, and so whether that's a confidence thing, whether that's a fatigue thing, whether that's whatever it might be, it's clear that he's not as effective now as he was 2 weeks ago, or even a week ago. Really, like it's starting to set in, and I think that's normal when you're playing, 22 minutes a night as a rookie. He's right around the number of games he played all of last season. Um, and so, the
Everybody
rookie
expected that it
wall,
would happen.
everybody except for Lane Hudson, because obviously the guy himself is not going to expect it. But,
No.
the Four Nations break for him comes at a pretty opportune time. It's pretty rare. Well, it's almost never happens. Whereas, the rookie wall, when there's like an international tournament scheduled for when the rookie wall normally hits, like, which is kind of what's happened here. The Four Nations is at a time of the year that rookies struggle with generally. Um, so if he could just push through these 8 games to get to that break, and come back refreshed and come back kind of the old version of himself, um, then look out down the stretch. Like, I mean, honestly, like he could really turn on the Jets. But this is going to be a good lesson for him in terms of being a pro. Like, he's got these 8 games ahead of him. Get through them, get a 2-week break at the end of it, and come back refreshed. But let's see what he looks like on Saturday. Forget the 8 games. Let's see what he looks like on Saturday. Maybe that's just a one-off in Detroit, but thought he looked a little sluggish along with the rest of the team against Tampa Bay as well. Looked great against the Rangers on Sunday. So, maybe this is just a little lull, but my main takeaway from the game in Detroit was that Lane Hudson is looking tired.
There's also the fact that he got penalties in 4 of the last 5 games. And sometimes it can be a sign that, you put yourself in a bad spot and now you're chasing the puck. And, you commit mistakes that are either born of hesitation, tentativeness, as you said, or plain fatigue. But he's compromised himself on a few occasions there. So, 4 penalties in the last 5 games. It's not something he did not have that pace early in the season. Although he's had his fair share of minor penalties, but certainly not to that cadence so far. So. I don't know if
And he's not alone in looking tired.
No,
we should point that out too. Like, it's not the whole team. The last 2 games, has looked tired.
Yeah.
I really feel against Tampa. Tampa was coming off a back-to-back. They flew from Toronto on Monday night. Montreal was rested, and it was Montreal looked like the team that had played the night before for the vast majority of that game, other than a 5-minute, a 2-minute stretch in the second period when they got their 2 goals. And for most of the third period as they played really well. But, through 40 minutes, Tampa looked like the fresher team, the more desperate team and the more urgent team. And against Detroit, the urgency was completely one-sided and the energy was completely one-sided. And so, I think
The players did not want to admit that, though. They were
of
like,
course they don't.
they were like, you got to give them credit because they played the way that we've been playing for the past 20
Yeah.
games. I feel like this is a line that was told by Marty to his players, and they picked up on that, because when many players repeat the same thing, it's because they've heard it and they repeat it.
Yeah.
It's not
100%.
It's not an analysis that they by themselves, they all come up to the same conclusion and put it in the same words, So
No, there's a reason we hear so many players talk about doing the right things over and over again.
Yeah.
That's not something they came up with on their own.
No, but Alexandre Carrier had a tough game against Detroit. Evans and Armia, their play has been slipping a little bit too. A bunch of guys. But it's the bigger ones. Slav was nondescript against Detroit, but probably the best player was on the Canadian side was Kirby Dach, who's really coming into his own. 8 goals in his past 14 games, so 8 goals since Christmas. He's really becoming the version, or reaching the level that they were hoping for. It was just a matter of how many games it would take him to get there. And after the game, I was asking him, you must be happy to be able to contribute that much offensively. But he says, I never lost confidence at any point in the season. And honestly, points are good. Yeah, well, yeah. But points are good. But he said, honestly, I would rather have come out of here with 0 points. We win a game 1-0, and I've done all the right things defensively. I would be just as happy. But
so it's good that he said that. The thing is, he is doing a lot of the right things defensively. Like, he is, like, Kirby Dach at the height of his powers with the Canadiens 2 years ago was a takeaway machine. Little stick lifts from behind, using his reach, really being effective at getting pucks back before it even left the offensive zone. He extended offensive zone shifts regularly because of his ability to get pucks back. And to do that, you need the reach and you need the IQ and you need the timing and everything, but you need feet. Your legs need to be able to allow you to do that. And his legs were not allowing him to do that earlier this season, when he was apparently fully confident in himself, but wasn't playing that way. It's really a matter of having the feet to be able to get those stick lifts. And frankly, both him and Laine in that area have shown vast improvement over the last few weeks. Laine is noticeable without the puck now, not all the time, and he's not some sort of defensive stalwart, but he's not nearly the liability that his reputation makes him out to be without the puck. There's a level of engagement and a level of care in his defensive play where it's clearly a priority to him to be better in that area. Whereas in past stops in Columbus and in Winnipeg, he was just known as a guy who did not care about that aspect of the game. And I don't think that's the case anymore. So I think there's a lot of
Laine, I look at him play defense, defensively, the way that he uses his stick, he defends a lot like Yoel Armia. Using his big body and lifting sticks and just getting in there to disrupt plays that way. So I feel like there's a similarity there. But
he uses his body to sort of separate players from the puck and stuff like that, and he uses his body really well to protect pucks, to do a lot of things. Like he's not a guy who's going to destroy people physically, like on occasion he does, I guess, but but he has other ways to use his reach and his body, and I feel the engagement is noticeable, and really I think the trigger for that was Alex Newhook. And so I don't know if I brought it up on the show or not, but do you remember in early December when I asked Marty about Newhook, and Marty said, he needs to understand that his pace is just as important defensively as it is offensively.
You brought it up on the pod. Yeah,
I
he
brought it
did.
up on the pod, right? So like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so now he's doing that. And I think there's a certain level of contagion from that on that
Mm.
line. Like now you're seeing Line do it more. You're seeing Dach definitely do it more. And this is like in Doc's case, like this is a part of his identity as a player. Like this is something he does at a very high level in the NHL. Like this is one of his strengths as a player. And as soon as he does that more, where he gets pucks back from behind, like surprising guys because they just don't think he can reach them from where he is, but he still manages to get a stick lift in and still manages to take the puck away. Like as soon as that gets more consistency, or he shows that with more consistency, like then we're going to really be back to the player that the Canadiens thought they had 2 years ago. But he got the endorsement from Marty not that long ago. Like I think he's through it, and so let's see if this is another Josh's back situation or if it's actually the case.
Yeah, but I mean, having Dach who's able to be involved, and the coach who won't hesitate to send him on the ice. You know, there was a point maybe a month and a half ago where his ice time was down to the 12 minutes on certain occasions, and Marty was a lot more hesitant to send that line on the ice, especially before Laine came back. But I think that it has contributed to Nick Suzuki being able to. We've been talking about energies and all that stuff. That I think that the Canadiens have found a way this year to get a more optimal workload for Nick Suzuki. It's pretty staggering because last year, I mean the years before, we know that Suzuki was used on the PK more than he is this year. This year, basically, he goes on the PK when Josh Anderson's in the box. That's pretty much it. But there was last year he did not play a ton on the PK, but still probably more than this year. But what is striking is that Martin Saint-Louis has reduced his ice time also 5-on-5. He plays on average per game. He plays more than a minute less at even strength than last year, and his production is up. So there's it's less Nick, better Nick, and
right.
So it shows how having guys that on the PK will do the job, so that you don't have to turn to Nick. That's one thing. Having a second offensive line with Dach helps also, so that Suzuki doesn't get all the offensive assignments, and the overall depth that we've been talking so much about this season. Being able to spread the workload around is another factor that has enabled Martin Saint-Louis to maybe reduce his minutes a little bit. But, a few shifts here and there that are taken away from Suzuki. And he probably won't complain because it doesn't really show like he's still the go-to guy up front. But when you see how impactful he's been, how much more consistent he's been, probably since the 12 or 15 games of the season, those minutes, those few shifts that he's got left have enabled him to keep some gas in the tank, and it really shows because he's more productive and more impactful.
Yeah, and I do think the biggest factor here is Dach in that line. It jumped out to me in Detroit on Thursday. The Dach line started the third period, and the line that starts periods, like Marty puts a lot of emphasis on that. Before Heineman got hurt, Jake Evans basically started every period. Why? Because he would go and play that period in the offensive zone, or that line would, and create a certain degree of momentum, or at least set the tone for how Marty wanted his team to play in that period. When Heineman went down, Marty tried a couple of times to do that with Evans, saw that it wasn't going to work. Actually, the first time he did it is when Pizzetta got the penalty 29 seconds into the game. So then he started using the Dvorak line, which is the line that started the game against Detroit. Same reason. Get Josh Anderson out there, crash and bang, go play in the offensive zone, forecheck like crazy, set the tone for how we want to play our game. So in the third period, down a couple of goals, needing to get back in the game, the line he sends out there is the Dach line. It would have been unthinkable in that situation for Marty to send the Dach line out to start the third period of that game 3 weeks ago, or maybe a month ago, whatever. Like at some point, that flipped, and that line, not just Dach, but primarily Dach, has earned a level of trust where they can go out and do a specific job that's important. The game before against Tampa, that was an offensive zone faceoff with 2.5 minutes left in a tie game in the third period. The Dach line is sent out there. It was a right side draw. Dach actually had to take the draw, lost it predictably. Marty could have easily put Jake Evans out there and said, "Go win the draw, and let's make sure we get the point. Let's make sure we bank this point." But no, he sent Dach out with his line and basically said, I don't know if he literally said this, but was basically saying, "Go out and win us the game. Go get us a goal. Let's go win the game." And those little moments of the start the third period against Detroit, that face off against Tampa, and honestly, like the fact that he did that meant that Jake Evans was available to take the D-zone draw that eventually turned into Jake Evans scoring the game-winning goal. So it's those little moments of confidence building that Marty's been doing with that line, I think has paid off, has been paid back to him in improved play and more responsible play, and just making sure that they're good defensively. And I think that answer that he gave you is a perfect example of the change in attitude that Kirby Dach has had, and how he's totally bought into what the team's trying to accomplish. But it's a chicken and the egg kind of thing, like which came first, the confidence from the coach, or did they actually? But I think there's a good mix of both, where they started showing something to the coach, and the coach wasn't so stubborn to keep banking on what he had seen for weeks, but was able to recognize, okay, there's a turn here. I have to start rewarding that. I have to start changing the way I handle those players, because they've shown me something that they weren't showing me before. So there's give and take always between coach and player, but I think what Marty has demonstrated pretty well over the last couple of months, especially, but ever since he's become coach, is he has a very keen sense for when that moment is right. When that moment is right to reward a player and to show more confidence in a player, because he has shown you something that you've been asking for. And so when the player does that, you have to reward it. And I think he's good at that. It's a good trait he has as a coach, is to recognize when the time to reward it, and only accentuate those things by rewarding it.
Yeah. Just a brief side note. You were mentioning that line in face-offs. Is it an issue, the fact that Newhook and Dach are both struggling in the face-off circle, and they're destined to be line mates for the rest of the season?
It's not ideal. Is it the end of the world? No. I mean, I don't think it is, but it's not ideal. You would like to, in the situation I described earlier in the Tampa game, you would like to have someone that you have some reasonable amount of confidence can win that faceoff. And when I saw the Dach line go out for that draw, I was like, well, they're not going to win this faceoff. It just seemed pretty obvious that was going to be the case. I don't recall who the faceoff was against, but regardless, it seemed clear that they were not going to win the faceoff, and they were probably going to have to wind up playing defense. And actually, even though, let's see, no, you know what? I think Dach got kicked out of that faceoff circle, and the play-by-play has Newhook winning it, but really it turned into a scramble draw, basically, and I think Tampa wound up getting possession off of it.
Okay.
But yeah, the play-by-play has Newhook winning that faceoff against Nick Paul, because I think Dach got tossed out of the faceoff circle. But yeah, it's an issue. Faceoffs are important, but there are more important things for the Canadiens right now than that. And they're still in a player development phase. I know Marty likes to say that we're learning how to win, but he doesn't say that we're done developing players. It's just that it's not solely about developing players. There's another layer to it, but they're still in a player development phase. And for Dach, coming back from the injury, having the difficult start to the season he had, these are moments where it's important that he go out and feel like he's earned something, feel good about himself. And so if he loses the draw, so be it. Is it ideal? No, but it's less important to me, at least, that than the benefits
The
of
trust.
putting the trust and the benefits of them feeling good, going out in important situations and being counted on by their coach to go out and do a job.
Yeah. It's a recurring theme in our discussion today, but if I go back to fatigue, Samuel Montembeault started the game extremely strong yesterday. He was like the only one almost who showed up at the beginning of that game, and it could have been ugly very fast. But then he gave up over the course of that game 2 bad goals, one of which on a very, very suspicious lateral move.
Yeah.
So there might be
that was a weird one.
Yeah. I mean,
Lucas Raymond made a good play, but it wasn't that great of a fake that you should completely go flying to the other side of the net.
It's like even before Raymond made his move, he had already committed. Which
was very similar to the William Nylander goal against Toronto, where he overcommitted to that side when Nylander had no chance of going to that side because Lane Hudson was draped all over him. So it was like,
so if there is an element of fatigue on Montembeault's side, those 8 games that are coming up, do you see maybe a different split in terms of how they would use their goalies? And do you think that the Canadiens should start Dobes a bit more until for the next 3 weeks?
I mean, the thing is that Montembeault is not getting those 2 weeks off, right?
No, I know.
He's one of the only guys. Him, Laine, and Army are the only guys who are not getting those 2 weeks off. And it's got
to be taken into account.
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, listen, there are 2 sets of back-to-backs in there, so that's for sure 2 games that Dobes is going to play minimum. There's obviously the San Jose, LA on February 4th and 5th. And right after that, New Jersey, Tampa on Super Bowl weekend, the traditional 2 matinees at the Bell Center. So those are 2 out of the 8 games that Dobes is guaranteed getting. I think he should get at least one more. Like, I don't think he should go even split over the last 8 games, but he should get one more, and I think that should come this week. So whether that's tomorrow against Jersey, which we don't know who's starting that game, the Winnipeg's in town Tuesday, Minnesota's in town Thursday. He needs I think he should get one of those games.
Right.
Because he's definitely getting one of San Jose or LA, and he's definitely getting one of Jersey, Tampa. So he needs one of these 3 games coming up. And frankly, I would start him against Jersey. So we'll see what happens, but that's what I would do.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because after the way Montembeault played he was great against Tampa, don't get me wrong. But after the way he played against Detroit, it's
Detroit's a tricky one. Detroit's a tricky one because he made a number of exceptional saves, and he still stopped. What do you have? 41 saves? 41 saves in that game.
Yeah, you're right.
He gave up 2 bad goals, but it's not like he was awful. Like he played.
No, of course.
He made a lot of big saves, and he kept that game relevant for longer than it probably should have been. So it's a tougher one to evaluate. I think the game against Tampa was a masterpiece. The game against Toronto was awful. But that game in Detroit, he made a lot of really, really nice saves in that game. It's just that DeBrincat goal and the Larkin goal weren't great. It's just those are 2 that he would have liked to have back. But I think the interesting thing here is, again, as we mentioned, chicken or egg, and as we mentioned, Marty recognizing when a player has earned more, when we were talking about Dach. Like with Dobes, at what point do you recognize that he's earned more? That he maybe deserves closer to a 50-50 split. Like it's the sample is still small, but what he's done so far has been extraordinary. I guess the one quibble I would have with starting him Saturday against Jersey is that if he's not going to play until, let's say, San Jose, and if not, let's say LA, that's next Tuesday or next Wednesday. So if you play him Saturday, then you're going to have him not play until Tuesday of next week.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that to take into account as well. Like, what do you don't want him sitting for too long a period of time. So maybe the Winnipeg game or the Minnesota game makes more sense. But aside from that, like, yeah, at what point does Dobes deserve, and are we at that point? Does he deserve more than getting a third of the games, let's say, which is kind of typical backup work? At a certain point, you just got to recognize that the guy just keeps winning, and
that's it.
You've given him every opportunity to lose, and he still hasn't done it. Like it's.
I'm curious to know at what point the coach is going to start thinking, well, okay, he's 5-0. We need a win, so let's turn to Dobes. If you need a win and you turn to that guy, then it tells something about where your evaluation of your goalie is, and maybe that it's worth looking into it and maybe changing the balance of work between the two guys. I don't think that we're there yet. They're being very cautious and not overplaying him, but at the same time, it's a lucky hand so far. He's got the hot hand, so.
But this is something that we've seen with Marty in terms of his management of the goalies. A, he leans heavily on Eric Raymond, the goalie coach, to manage this. But B, he is, as we saw with Jake Allen, like there were times when it was clear that Jake Allen was not playing very well, and Marty kept sending him out there. You know, like in terms of leaning towards respecting your veterans when it comes to the goalies. He has shown a propensity to do that, to be a little more reluctant to let a younger goalie, you know, Sam Montembeault took him some time to get that status when he was clearly deserving of it sooner than he got it, you know, like, but there was a veteran guy in front of him and Jake Allen was going to get the benefit of the doubt from Marty St. Louis. Like that was really, and now it's Sam Montembeault that's going to get the benefit of the doubt from Marty St. Louis. And so it's going to be interesting to see.
Stealing that chair, you know, but the chair, you're not going to give a chair to somebody overnight. You better earn it.
And with the goaltending having only one chair, it better be pretty, you know, kind of like replay review. You know, it has to be clear, and it has to be. Oh man, what's the word we use in replay? It has to be anyhow. It has to be convincing. Like you have to be convinced before he's going to change Montembeault's status as the clear number one to more of a 1A, 1B scenario, let's say.
Yeah.
But you know, Dobes is going to play this week, I would imagine, at some point.
For sure.
Whether it's Saturday, Tuesday, or Thursday, he's going to get one of those games. And whichever game he gets, he's going to be facing a difficult opponent. If he goes out and beats a difficult opponent again for a sixth time in a row, all tough opponents, maybe you have to start having that debate a little bit and say, maybe go to a system where it's based on merit and game to game. You have to earn your next start. I don't know what, I mean, that can be healthy sometimes, you know, if a goalie feels that he has to go out and earn it or else he's sitting the next game. Sometimes that has a benefit to it. And like we've seen that work in the past. I don't think we're there yet either, but if Dobes keeps doing what he's doing, then you might have to consider it.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Okay. On a completely.
Meanwhile, we're probably, if we have Montembeault versus Allen on Saturday, it's not going to have the same juice as like Halak versus Price, you know, back in the day. Like when
no,
it's unfortunately, that's what I want. I want like an old school revenge game. But I don't think this is going to be the case. Plus,
Allen's number against the Canadiens are not great. He's an 882 goalies over the course of his career against Montreal. 3 wins, 5 losses. I mean, he's been struggling more against some other teams, but there's plenty of them against which he's got, save percentages over 900. It's normal, otherwise he wouldn't be in the NHL. but it hasn't. He doesn't exactly have the Canadiens number, but the competitive juices, I'd be curious to see. If that matchup appears on Saturday night, you're right. It's a good little storyline there. And he's such a good guy. I mean, Jake Allen, can't say a bad thing about this guy.
No, we can't.
He's a beauty.
Yeah.
Yeah. Listen, there was on Pierre Maguire's podcast, he invited his good friend Jeff Gorton the other day, and vice president of hockey operations of the Montreal Canadiens said on the record. That's why I bring it up, because I think that it's worth at least mentioning or discussing for a minute, that he would be open to providing a bit of help to his team, and give them, if they were to remain in the mix, basically to go get a bit of help at the trade deadline, which seems like something we would not have guessed 2 months ago. But now it's not just standing pat and, the own rentals thing. It's being open to the possibility of adding.
Yeah.
So is there, I wouldn't expect them to go after like a hot ticket, like a high profile player. I'm sure that the Canadiens are going to keep their ammo for the summer. They're going to have a lot of financial flexibility in the summer. They're going to have a lot of draft picks and prospects that they can trade if they want to go get an interesting player on the market. So I don't think that the trade deadline is the main time to do that. But adding a player, that'd be nice. There are some little tweaks here and there that can be done on the roster to improve that team. No.
Well, listen, the Canadiens have 3 third-round picks, 2 fourth-round picks in the upcoming draft. The 2 fourth-round picks is what I'm looking at. They have their own pick, and I believe the Bruins pick. And so, when he talks about adding, listen, like, we're seeing the situation with Michael Pezzetta right now. He's not an ideal 13th forward in the sense that the coach doesn't really trust him to play a regular shift. Would it be nice to have a 13th forward that the coach does trust to play a regular shift in case someone gets hurt? Yes, that would be nice. So that would be a good thing to add if the Canadiens are still in position to strike. I don't think they would do anything that would vastly improve the team at that stage of the season. I don't think they'd be willing to pay the price for it. And I don't think they would want to mess with the chemistry that they have. The depth is good. All the lines look good. Good enough, at least. Can they be better? Sure. But is it worth messing with the chemistry? Is it worth spending the assets it would cost to get one of those players? I would argue probably not at this stage of what they're trying to do. And I agree with you that they want to keep their ammo to make trades in the offseason. The 2 firsts, 2 seconds, 3 thirds, 2 fourths. This is all good ammunition to do something at the draft or ahead of the draft, in terms of acquiring a player that can help immediately, especially with 4 free agents. Well, if you include Pezzetta, 5 free agents impending for this summer. So, but it's I think adding, it serves 2 purposes. In the case of getting a forward to play the Pezzetta role, if you will, there's the practical matter of having a forward that Marty feels comfortable putting in the lineup if need be. And then there's the other side of it, which is the psychological side of it, where you tell your team, not only are we not going to trade away our free agents, here, we're actually adding someone This is how much we believe in you. So now go out and reward this belief. Like go out and show us something, you know? So there's that too. And when you talk to Nick Suzuki after the trade deadline last year and after the trade deadline the year before, but particularly last year, and actually not even at the trade deadline, but after Sean Monahan got traded, Suzuki, Caulfield, so many of those guys were like, but Suzuki in particular, like I'm really sick of seeing guys leave our room, and I'm sick of us putting our team in a position where they have to do things like this. We have to make it so that they don't have to do things like this anymore. And he was adamant about that last year after Monahan got traded, which was right around this time, a little earlier, I think.
And the reaction to Patrick Laine's arrival was the mirror image of that.
Exactly.
When they said, "Oh, it's a nice change to add a player instead of subtracting one."
So I think there's something to the notion that, you know, you challenged your players, you added this piece in Laine, spent assets to do it, traded away a good young defenseman in Jordan Harris to do it, even though the trade was quite favorable. You added a second round pick as a result. But double down on that feeling, you know, like double down on that. And so if you add some sort of bit player of some kind, you know, like a depth player, a role player, someone that will just help in case of injury or what have you. I mean, listen, like, you know, Emil Heineman's having a tremendous rookie season, but all it took was him getting injured for this issue to come up. And he's a fourth line winger. You know, if you lose a second line winger or a third line winger, like, you know, it only becomes even more accentuated. So if you can have a player that can fill in because you've had to move Heineman up the lineup, or you've had to move Armia up the lineup, or Evans up the lineup, and someone who can walk in and fill that role on the fourth line and have the fourth line continue to be a factor. I think it sends a good message to the group, and as long as it's not that pricey, it doesn't really derail the Canadiens' plan in any significant way.
But it's tricky, though, to say, oh, we're going to go add a 13 forward, because when everybody's healthy, that person doesn't play. So who's good enough to improve your team, but quote unquote bad enough that he's not going to play on a regular basis? You know,
I mean, it's pretty, like, I think most players on the fourth line of selling teams are not as good as the fourth line players of the Canadiens. I mean, how many times have we talked about weak link, strong link? Like, this is a weak link team. So the Canadiens' weak link is better than most other teams' weak link players, you know? So if you're going out and picking up a player who plays on the fourth line of, say, the Ducks or the Blackhawks or whoever, even the third line in some cases, I think, you're acquiring a player who's going to have to sit in all likelihood, you know? And so these players don't usually have like no trade clauses, you know, like they're just gonna have to deal with it. They'll just come, and if they're needed, they'll be called upon. And if not, then they'll have to fall in line. I mean, that's just reality. When you're a role player in the NHL, this is your reality.
Yeah, for sure. But I'm thinking of a guy, for example, like Sam Lafferty in Buffalo, who's a gritty player, who's versatile, and he could be a nice addition. And he's sat before in his career, and he's been put on waivers in his career. But he's good enough to play, you know. And usually, he's not a 13 forward usually.
Well, that would seem to be right up the Canadiens' alley.
Yeah,
a guy like that.
Yeah.
And frankly, I mean, if the play dips for anyone, like, it'd be nice to just have a guy, and Lafferty has another year left on his deal. But you know, it'd be nice to have a guy where, let's say Heineman hits the wall a bit and starts to, even though he's been a pro hockey player in North America for, you know, he had last year, and I'm not saying it will, but if someone's play dips, to have a guy that's a viable replacement for that player also helps. Just knowing that guy's there will maybe prevent those dips from lasting as long as they otherwise would. Like, there's definitely a psychological effect for players knowing that, hey, if I let up, this guy's sitting there and he's not happy about not playing. You know, like, he wants to play. So
yeah,
like, they don't have that right now with Pezzetta. with all due respect to Michael Pezzetta, no one in the lineup when Michael Pezzetta is out is kind of fearing like, oh, if my play goes down, they might put Pezzetta in. I don't think that's a thing that's happening in the room right now. Whereas if you did add, let's say someone like Lafferty, even though he's got a year left on his deal, but a player like that, that's a real thing. If you got a guy like him just sitting waiting in the wings, that's a sentiment. That's an internal competition element that could really have an impact.
But it goes to show also how having a healthy lineup is a weird change for the day-to-day life of the Montreal Canadiens. We've been accustomed of seeing this team being ravaged by injuries. They led the league, I think, two or three years in a row, or were certainly among like the top injured teams for a few years in a row. Having a healthy lineup for them, it's great. But on the one hand, you say, okay, well, we've got our 11 or 12 top forwards that are there. So it's a different type of ad if you want to bring in the player, because you're, for the time being at least, because of where they are in their build, they're not necessarily looking for a dramatic upgrade anywhere. But it's sort of like an on the margin type of acquisition that they would be looking for. But by the same token, having a healthy lineup for an extended period of time, I think that they must keep that in mind in the evaluation of their team, because it was important for them. It was an amazing opportunity to assess where the team is at with a full lineup and say, okay, this is what we've got.
Yeah.
But at the same time, this is not going to be the reality forever. And the reinforcement coming with the young players, the Owen Beck of this world and the Joshua Roy of this world and all that, these young reinforcements down the road will be important, because this is not reality. This is not typical hockey. There will be injuries at some point.
Yeah.
So you need to have your depth not only among your 12 forwards that are playing, but you need to be 15 deep, 16 deep, if you can, of guys that you can put in the lineup and say, I'm not crossing my fingers every time they go on the ice because they're not good enough, or because they're good, but they're just not ready. So having that level of depth, I think, is something that's really attainable for this team if they let those youngsters develop in Laval. But this is more, I think it goes to show with the whole Pezzetta thing that they don't have a guy that they could bring from Laval and say, take his spot and you're going to be that guy. They don't want to do that. They won't want to sit a young player for an extended period of time. But down the road, I think that if they can manage to build enough depth to withstand injuries, that'd be amazing, because in the past that has really hurt them.
I wonder if Anthony Beauvillier would be an option. If Pittsburgh keeps kind of dropping, like he's doing pretty. He's got 11 goals this year. It's he would be a guy that. Well, you'd be your 13th forward. Wouldn't play it. He'd just be sitting there waiting to play.
Yeah.
He wouldn't be a typical fourth line ad in terms of like, here, we're going to put you on our fourth line and you can go play that style. He's not that style of player. But I don't know. I mean, he could be a guy. The real problem right now is that the buyers aren't clear. The sellers aren't clear.
No.
It's hard to like really determine who is going to be selling.
I think that one more guy could play the PK. One more guy can take faceoffs. That's what I would be looking at.
Right.
I told you the other day I threw the name out of Mark Jankowski, who could be ad for next to nothing. That sort of guy. He's been bouncing up and down from the American League and National Hockey League throughout his career, but he can be serviceable. You can scratch him, you can play him, and he's going to do you that sort of stuff, that sort of work for you.
Yeah, he's
Beauvillier,
already 30.
Beauvillier or
No,
Jankowski?
Jankowski.
Yeah,
I remember when he was
he's been around.
drafted.
He's been
Yeah,
around for a while.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Beauvillier is that right profile. The team
He's not
but
that profile, but he's if you're talking about, because the thing is that if you're talking about, like, if someone were to get injured higher up the lineup, you know,
oh
I
yes,
guess Heineman could move up the lineup, and I think he would fit in on a higher
mm-hmm.
line. But it's not as if the Canadiens are swimming in guys that are ideally suited to play higher in the lineup. Like, I think the reason Brendan Gallagher's had a good season is because of the role he's playing. Josh Anderson, it's because of the role he's playing. Like, they have a lot of guys who have really bought into a bottom six identity, that might not be well suited to play if, say, Newhook were to get hurt, or Laine were to get hurt, or
Yeah,
Slav were to get hurt, or someone in the top six were to get hurt. Then, at that point, Mark Jankowski's not the ideal guy to have. A guy like Beauvillier could be, but I'm just spitballing. I don't actually think, but he's a UFA. Like, that's the thing. Like, Jankowski has a year left on his contract. Lafferty has a year left on his contract.
Yeah, I like those guys. When you have so many UFAs to be, it's good to have a guy who's under contract for next year, so it gives you a bit of leverage and a plan B, knowing that you've got a bottom six player who's under contract, and you're not forced to sign these guys, and
Right.
because you can have an alternative. It might not be optimal, but they're there and they can be used. But yeah, Beauvillier, I mean, if there's a need higher up the lineup, he's more that type of guy. He could be like an inexpensive acquisition, because the team that's going to get him at the deadline will look at those 11 goals and they'll say, well, come and score them for me.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, yeah, that's for sure. I mean, there's Brandon Tana's a UFA.
Mm.
That's like a luxury. That's a luxury fourth liner.
Yeah, it seems like a good ad for a Stanley Cup contender, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Much like Yanni Gourde, which would be the ultimate luxury buy.
Ooh,
but
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, Harpin.
Yeah.
Future Friday, huh?
Future Friday. Let's do it.
Future Friday.
Okay, I'm going to let you go ahead today. We're going to talk about Vinzenz Rohrer, because you had a little interaction there. Well, I'll let you tell the story. And
yeah. So last year around this time, I went to Switzerland, right? I went to see David Reinbacher with Cloten, and I also spent a day going to practice with Zurich SC, the ZSC Lions, where Vinzenz Rohrer played and is still playing today. He was being coached by former NHL coach Mark Crawford. Now, just after Christmas, Mark Crawford had to leave the team. He stepped down from his position as coach, citing needing to pay attention to his mental health, and he had a whole bunch of. He wrote a very heartfelt letter to the Zurich fans and said, "I'm sorry, but I can't put everything I can into my job, and so I feel it's best to step down." I spoke to Mark Crawford, obviously, on my visit last year about Rohrer, and really it was a fascinating meeting with him. Spoke to their strength and conditioning coach and talked to me about just how committed he is in the gym, to get stronger and to get better. And so the role he was playing last year was really kind of a bottom six role, but at his age, it was still a remarkable role for him to be playing in a league that strong. And so at the time, Mark Crawford said, I can see him being like a Mike Keane type of player in the NHL. And I thought, wow, well, yeah, that would be great if he was a Mike Keane type of player. So anyhow, this season, he's still very young for that league. He's 20. Um, he has 10 goals and 8 assists in 36 games. But when I saw that Mark Crawford had stepped down, I did reach out to him. I sent him a note, and I was just like, "Listen, I was just wondering if you could tell me how Rohrer's been doing." And so he's playing in a more offensive role. He's playing with Derek Grant, who's a former NHLer and is one of the best players in the National League in Switzerland. But Crawford said he still projects, Rohrer does, still projects to him as a top 9 NHL forward, unbelievable work ethic, great competitor, high end penalty killer moving forward. And his scoring will kind of depend on a few factors. But the interesting thing is he said he feels that the NHL game will suit Rohrer's style better than the National League. And he also said that his belief is that once the National League season ends, that Rohrer might wind up in Laval. Now, I haven't actually checked this with anyone, but he just kind of said that all on his own. I didn't ask him about that, but yeah, like sort of he's a very gritty player, and he's somewhat much like Emil Heineman was. When Heineman was playing in the SHL, I spoke to the GM of his team in was it Lexans? Yeah, I guess he played. Did he play for Lexans? I forget. Anyhow, I spoke to his GM at the time, and he said that he felt that Heineman would be better suited to play on the North American ice surface and a North American style of game because of that grit, because of his physical nature. And now we're seeing that to be true. Crawford seems to feel the same way about Rohrer. And so I'll be really interested to see if he does actually come over at the end of this season. But one thing to keep in mind is that Mark Crawford's brother is Eric Crawford, who's the head of pro scouting for the Montreal Canadiens, and they have been in constant communication about this player. Mark Crawford's really high on him. And so he's a guy that we don't talk about a whole lot, but he's playing a significant role on a good team in a very good league at a very young age. And his work ethic is beyond reproach. And so that's something to watch out for as this season moves along, is will Laval be adding this player to their potential playoff push between now and the end of the season?
The only thing that I wonder is for a guy who could profile as a third liner, 200-foot player, but mainly defensive responsibilities and a great deal of grit in his game. 168 pounds is really not a lot.
Well, that's where the work ethic in the gym comes from, and that's why when I did the story on him, my conversation with the strength coach was the most fascinating one, and he was just convinced. He's like, this kid is going to do everything it takes to be physically able to withstand that league, and he's doing it on a daily basis. Like, they have to send him home from the gym.
Okay.
They have to be like, get out of here. Like, go do something else. It's crazy. Like, it's really, he's been a strength coach in pro hockey in Europe. He used to be in Sweden, now here for many years. He's like, I've never had a player like this devoted and this committed to doing what's necessary in the gym to make the NHL. And plus, just besides that, like, he is just a super interesting guy to talk to. Like, he's a very he's a cerebral guy. His game is more or less cerebral. Like, he does, it's a lot of work ethic and a lot of grit and a lot of effort. But him as a person, he's a super cerebral kid, and obviously he's, it's been a year since I spoke to him, and so I'm sure he's changed somewhat, but just the way he talked, you felt like you were talking to a 30-year-old man instead of a 19-year-old kid. Like, he had a perspective on things. Like, he was just a really, really interesting guy to talk to. And so he's a very intriguing prospect. And I agree with you. The weight, and he would agree with you, the weight is the impediment, right? Like, he needs to play the style that he plays at the NHL level. He will need to add weight. And he's doing that. He's working on it, and then so if he can get to like 180 5'10", 180, he could play that style in the NHL. And if he doesn't get there, it won't be for a lack of trying, because that guy cares. Like a great
there's
deal.
one guy who plays that style with that exact frame, and he was in the news last week because of Connor McDavid, and that's Connor Garland.
Yeah.
Connor Garland is not any bigger than Vinzenz Rohrer, and he's just as feisty as they come. He's a nasty piece of work.
He's got a bit more scoring than I think Rohrer probably will have.
Yeah.
But yeah, he plays that agitating kind of gritty style. Hey, speaking of feeling old, sorry, but I'm just on Vinzenz Rohrer's Elite Prospects page. You know whose birthday it is today? Martin Rivai.
Oh yeah.
He turns 30 today.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, that guy was an enigma.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I wonder where he's at. Where's he at?
I don't know. But where he was 5 minutes ago, he might be somewhere else now.
Yeah. He's playing in Slovakia. He's playing pro hockey in Slovakia. Yeah. Okay. And he's been there for a little bit. But
oh yeah. Okay. He finally settled down.
Yeah. 30th birthday today. But
okay.
But yeah, in terms of Roar, far from being a sure thing, but his decision to go play in Zurich rather than stay here, we'll see how it turns out. But it was an interesting one, but it put him into a pro environment much quicker. Mm-hmm. And not just because the environment in Zurich, like not only is the National League a pro environment in Switzerland, but Zurich in particular is a professional hockey organization. Like they run things very NHL like, and so he's given himself, I think, the best opportunity to actually make the NHL by playing at a really high level organization over there, and obviously being closer to home. It helps him that he's not considered an import player in the Swiss league because he played his minor hockey in Switzerland, even though he's from Austria. Much like Reinbacher, it was the same situation with him. So
but Austrian players are not considered imports in Switzerland.
Not all Austrian players are. You have to have played, because you can't really play high level youth hockey in most of Austria. Like if you at some point you get too good to play youth hockey in Austria, especially these players like Reinbacher, Rohrer, Rossi, Casper, like they're all like players that basically grew up on the Swiss border. So
Raffle.
Raffle, yeah, it was easier for them to come and, well, actually not easier. It was vital for them to go play their youth hockey in Switzerland just because the level was higher. So when you do that, you're not considered an import in the National League. So, but anyhow, I think he's just a player. Like it's easy for this guy to get lost in the shuffle because the Canadiens have so many prospects, and he's just another one. But it was interesting that a year later, Mark Crawford's tune on him has not changed one bit. If anything, it's been accentuated that he's going to be, a third line penalty killing gritty forward in the NHL one day. So we'll see. We'll see if his evaluation is bang on, and especially we'll see if his prediction that he's coming to Laval by the end of the season comes true.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing that. That's fun. Good tidbit of information, man.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for listening to the BasuandGodin Notebook. If you have not subscribed to our podcast, you can do so at BasuandGodin.com, and by becoming a paid subscriber, you can have access also to our full Monday episodes. So because we have 2 episodes a week, and if you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, for example, well, don't hesitate to give us a 5-star rating and drop a little comment. It's always appreciated. So enjoy your weekend, everybody, and we'll talk to you again on Monday.